Hello there, my name is Richard McMunn and I'm from howtobecome.com, and during this presentation I'm going to teach you how to pass the train driver interview. Now, every year many hundreds and hundreds of applicants apply to become train drivers, but only a very small percentage of those people actually pass the train driver selection process and realise their dream of becoming a train driver. And there is a very good reason why the majority of them fail. Basically, they are ill prepared. They will go and have a look on the internet and try and find out the kind of questions that they're going to get asked, and whilst there's nothing wrong with that, they are actually failing to prepare in the correct manner. During this presentation I want to try and get over that problem and help you to prepare effectively. I will talk about the qualities that are required to become a train driver, and also the types of questions that you will get asked at the interviews that relate to those qualities and attributes. So, the qualities of a train driver, why are they important to know? Well, basically this is how you're going to be assessed during part of the train driver interview. If you understand the qualities that are required to become a train driver, then you will have a far greater chance of succeeding. So if you understand the qualities and attributes that are required in the role, then you have a far greater chance of being successful. So let's take a look at the role of a train driver. Now, you may have an idea of what the role actually involves, but on this slide I've actually highlighted some of the key important areas of the role of a train driver, and I'll explain in a little while why these highlighted words are important. So let's take a quick look at this. So, as well as driving the train, you'll have a number of customer service responsibilities, and those include addressing passengers using the onboard public address system, keeping your passengers informed, and helping to develop good passenger relations. You also make sure their safety is paramount at all times, reacting quickly and calmly in an emergency situation, reporting incidents wherever necessary. Train drivers need to be able to maintain exceptional levels of concentration. After all, this is a high pressured role, calling for you to be cool, calm and responsible. You'll also be a strong communicator and capable of working on your own initiative. Flexibility is also essential, since trains operate 24 hours a day all year round. That means your shift lengths and patterns will vary, including early starts, late finishes, weekends and bank holidays. Now, the reason why I've highlighted these particular key areas is because if I was preparing for the train driver interview, I would take each of these highlighted keywords and phrases and I would predict the interview questions from them. So you can see from this role of a train driver that the train operating company who has advertised this role is extremely conscientious about customer service and customer focus. They want their trains to run on time, and they want their train drivers to have customer service responsibilities. So they start off by saying, well, as well as driving the train, so even though driving the train is a real important element of the selection process and of the role, you have to focus on these different key areas as well. So you'll have a number of customer service responsibilities. So it's quite feasible for the train operating company to say to you at interview, can you give us an example of where you've carried out effective customer service? Because anybody can turn around and say, yes, I would be good at customer service, but actually backing it up with evidence, and I'll talk about evidence in a little while, is a different thing. You also have to address passengers. So therefore, it's quite reasonable for them to ask you to give them evidence of where you have been effective at communicating to a large number of people. Because not everybody can go on a public address system and address a large amount of people. So they're going to want to see that you're confident in your abilities to do that. They want you to develop good passenger relations. And that's basically about being a role model for the organisation. Because lots of people apply for many different train operating companies without carrying out sufficient research about the train operating company that they want to join, because basically they're just determined to become a train driver and they don't care which TOC they join. I think this is a mistake. I think you need to think carefully about the train operating company that you want to join and look at their passenger relations. Become a role model for that train operating company. You'll also make sure their safety is paramount at all times, and I cannot stress enough before you go to interview to make sure that you are fully safety conscious. If you have any qualifications or you have been on any training courses, whether it's health and safety or NEBOSH, that relate to health and safety, then brilliant, make sure you mention them. But safety should be paramount at all times or during your responses to the interview questions. Now you have to react quickly and calmly as a train driver, because let's say you get into an emergency situation, and the chances are as a train driver that will happen during your career. How are you going to react? The passengers are going to look to you and your staff to make sure that you deal with the situation effectively, and that's also about following rules and procedures. Can you remain calm? Can you contact the call centre to make them aware of a situation on the track ahead? Make sure you are calm, you can act quickly, and you can relay effective communication to the people required. And obviously reporting incidents. Train drivers need to be able to maintain high levels of concentration. So it is not unrealistic to think that the train operating company are going to say to your interview, can you give us an example of when you've concentrated for a long period of time? And for some people that can be hard, because they're thinking, well, what kind of example could I give? And sometimes it's the most obvious things that would be good examples to give. For example, let's say that you have learnt how to play a musical instrument. That means that you've had to concentrate on learning that musical instrument for a long period of time, and that could be a good example to use. It's a high pressured role, so you could be required at interview to give an example of where you've carried out a task during a high pressurized role. You have to be cool, calm and responsible, and a strong communicator, which I've already mentioned about being good at communicating. And obviously working on your own. I'll virtually guarantee at the interview they will say to you, can you give us an example of when you've worked on your own for long periods of time? Because working on your own unsupervised means that you have to be highly responsible and organised. Now, not many people believe it, but flexibility is a very important element of the role of a train driver. Because trains have to operate all the time, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, all year round, then they need you to be flexible. So they will probably ask you at interview, give an example of when you've been flexible, or how do you feel about working shifts? Because having personally worked shifts for about 17 years, they can become a little bit tedious, and they're going to want to know that your life is set up so that you can deal with them effectively. Now, there are usually two types of interview for the train driver selection process. One is called the manager's interview, and one is the structured interview. The structured interview usually comes first, but let's take a quick look at the manager's interview. Now, this is more of a conventional job interview, and it's usually undertaken with an operations manager and a driver's depot manager, and they want to see what you're like, and they will ask questions about why you want to join the company. So you need to carry out research about the train operating company. You can do that by going on their website. Why you think you'd be good at the job, and how you think you'd fit into the team environment. Now, the structured interview is different. This is an interview which is conducted according to laid down guidelines, and it maintains fairness and non-discrimination. It will probably be given by a couple of people, usually from the Human Resources Department, or the Personnel Department as it is sometimes called. Now, before that kind of interview will commence, you're given a form to complete, and that will ask you to write a description of different experiences that you've had. After a set period of time, the interviewer will then take the form, and during the interview they will ask you to expand on your brief descriptions about these situations. So they will ask probing questions like, how did you feel about this? Would you do anything different if the same situation arose in the future? And this interview usually lasts for about an hour. I believe it is harder than the manager's interview, because you have to come up with certain kinds of situations and experiences that you've been in before. And you'll know that throughout this presentation so far, I've been talking to you about being able to provide evidence. And I've already mentioned a number of sample train driver interview questions. So give an example of when you've provided excellent customer service. Give an example of when you've worked effectively under pressure. Give an example of when you've concentrated for long periods of time. Give an example of when you've been flexible. And give an example of when you have followed rules and procedures. And also give an example of when you've communicated an important message to a large number of people. Now, they're just a number of sample train driver interview questions. You can get a whole host of more of these questions and sample responses at howtobecome.com. But before you do, I want to finish off by telling you how to respond to these kind of questions and how to formulate your responses. I recommend you use what is called the STAR technique. So before you go to your train driver interview, pick out the questions that I've given you and also the ones that you're going to get from howtobecome.com. Write down STAR on an A4 sheet of paper like that, and underneath each heading I want you to write down the evidence that you're going to give and tell the interview panel. So start off by explaining the situation that you was in. Okay, so if the question is, can you give an example of when you've worked effectively as part of a team, explain what the situation was. Then explain what the task was that you had to carry out. What was the end goal? Then the third part is tell the interview panel what action you took and what action other people took in order to achieve that goal, that end task. And then finally, tell them what the result was following your actions. And a key tip is to make sure that the result is positive following your actions, and if you achieve the task that was set, that is fantastic. Okay, now like I say, you can go to howtobecome.com and get some more sample interview questions, and I also run a train driver course at www.traindrivercourse.co.uk. I wish you all the very best for becoming a train driver and passing the interview, and thank you very much for watching and listening.